Hey there, gamers! Today I wanted to tell you about 20 awesome survival games that came out in 2025. We've got games that dropped super recently, and some that just left early access. So, you might have already heard about some of these. Let's not waste any time. Let's get started. Atomfall. This is the game many people are calling British Fallout with survival elements. And for good reason. The setting is England after a nuclear disaster where everything's soaked in Cold War vibes, mystery, and British atmosphere. You can really see it visually. You play as a lone wanderer roaming through a quarantine zone in northern England, trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. Gameplay-wise, it's your standard mix of survival, action, and RPG elements. You walk around, gather resources, craft stuff from ammo to medkits, and customize your weapons to fight off mutants, robots, and crazy locals. There's also stealth if you don't feel like going in guns blazing, plus dialogue choices that affect the actual story. Yeah, just like New Vegas, but with that British flavor, and the world matches the setting perfectly. Green English hills with rusted tanks, pubs, and old mansions. The main thing here is complete freedom. Want to blast everyone with a rifle? Go for it. Want to sneak around and collect clues to uncover the truth about the disaster? That works too. Plus, the story isn't linear. They've already counted at least 6 different endings. Wouldn't surprise me if there are more. If you're into Fallout, Stalker, or just love diving into lore and building your own story, Atomfall is definitely a game worth checking out. RailGods, a survival game with a pretty unusual setting. Basically a Lovecraftian nightmare. The concept goes like this. You're a survivor in a world where the old gods have awakened and decided to turn everyone into mincemeat. And your base isn't just some shack. It's a living train that feeds on flesh and requires sacrifices to gain power. The mechanics focus on survival with emphasis on crafting and co-op. You gather resources, build train cars, craft weapons and altars to satisfy your iron god, as weird as that sounds. The train itself can be customized like crazy, from turrets to ritual halls. The game also has this insanity system. Basically, if you make too many sacrifices to your train, you'll start seeing creepy hallucinations over time. And yeah, the game opens up way better in co-op than solo, so if you've got friends, definitely play with them. In short, it's a game where you build a nightmare train and pray it doesn't eat you. Sounds pretty unusual, and it plays that way too. Dune Awakening. Here, as you can probably guess, it's survival based on the famous series. The game had a rough start due to technical issues, but as of when I'm writing this script, everything's in perfect order now. If you've watched the movies, I think you get what awaits you here. If not, let me paint the picture. Your survival location is the merciless place called Arrakis. Think of it as this massive sandy desert where you play as some poor soul whose job is to survive, find water, which is the most valuable currency here, and not get eaten by the local sandworms. Basically, it's this MMO survival where you need to build your own base from scrap, extract water from blood, yeah, sounds gross, but it works, and ride around on local bikes so you don't become worm food. You can and should craft still suits so you don't pass out, and take contracts from traders or bandits. And yeah, I really recommend playing co-op with friends when possible, because surviving solo is not easy. Also, gotta praise the graphics. Obviously, Unreal Engine 5 works wonders in skilled hands, and this is exactly that case. The game looks stunning, but it demands proper hardware in return, so keep that in mind. Another Try 2. A game that ideally should have been a hit, but something went wrong. It's basically budget Rust where there's another zombie apocalypse, and you're one of the last survivors trying not to become food for the local walking meat. Basically, it's classic open-world survival where you collect loot, craft gear, and build a base to fight off zombies and other players. The mechanics are pretty standard. Chop trees, mine ore, build your place, and pray nobody steals your hard-earned stuff. The game also has co-op, so you can play with friends and build your base while fighting zombies. Or yeah, classic genre style, raid someone else's base, or wait for someone to raid yours. But despite all the promising description, there's a big spoonful, more like a whole pot, of tar. It's early access, which is why the reviews are mixed, and it feels like a big raw demo version. So here you get just a couple biomes, basic crafting, and zombies that sometimes get stuck in textures. The idea was decent. The survival focused on PvP and co-op where you can build anything from a shack to a fortress, but unfortunately it all feels very cheap and unfinished. For example, the zombie Ai is dumb, and the interface sometimes glitches so bad you want to quit the game. Overall, you can check it out. It costs pennies. But I'd wait for patches. Hopefully the devs will polish this decent concept. Dreadzone, a relatively fresh survival game that recently entered early access on Steam. The story setup or concept seems primitive at first glance. Another zombie apocalypse, but with one nuance. You play as an infected person who gets thrown into a quarantine zone full of ruins, abandoned factories, bunkers, and wild nature. The goal is crystal clear: survive, either until the local Walking Dead eat you, or until the virus takes full control of your body. Or try your luck and find a vaccine. The gameplay formula is pretty standard for survival games. You need to wander around the abandoned zone, collect metal, food, and water, craft gear like axes, bows, or even build your own base to hide from mutants and other scum. There's also hunting and the ability to trade with other survivors, and if they don't stab you in the back. Plus, you can storm abandoned places looking for useful resources. And since I mentioned other players, yeah, obviously like any other modern survival game, you can play co-op with up to 4 people where everything mentioned above can be done with friends. The graphics are decent, but optimization leaves much to be desired. It's early access after all, so there might be freezes even on decent hardware. Overall, it's definitely worth trying, but personally I'd wait until they polish the game, fix bugs, optimization, and add a bit more content. Revenge of the Savage Planet. I don't know if any of you remember, but back in the day there was this really beautiful and addictive survival game called Journey to the Savage Planet, which I remembered myself while watching a Google Stadia retrospective. Really interesting video, by the way. I'll leave the link in the description. Definitely worth watching. So this game is something like a sequel. You play as an employee of one of the best space companies who decides to get revenge on their boss while exploring a new planet full of psychedelic creatures and toxic puddles. Gathering resources, crafting gear, upgrading weapons, and scanning everything that moves to unlock new zones. And like any other modern survival game, there's co-op and even split-screen play, which is pretty surprising for this genre. But the main fun is the humor and freedom. The game doesn't take itself seriously, from monsters that spit slime to corporate jokes about your low salary. Plus, exploration is really addictive. Each new zone opens through upgrades, and you're always finding something new. Though the game and its campaign are pretty short. You won't be able to sink 100 hours into it. Takes about 10 to 15 hours on average, which is also kind of a plus for people who don't have much free time. The Wandering Village. This game didn't get a sequel after 5 years, and instead it went from early access to full release. And what makes it different from other survival games? Well, at first glance it's simple. The world has ended once again, covered by some toxic threat, and we play as a small group of survivors who found salvation on the back of a huge creature named Onbu, like a living dinosaur with 6 legs that wanders the wastelands. It's up to you to decide whether you become a parasite or find the perfect balance. Gameplay-wise, it's simple. A simulator with city-building elements. You need to build houses, farms, warehouses, and workshops, gathering resources like wood and stone right from its back, then optimize chains, like where to plant wheat so you don't starve. At the same time, yeah, your animal needs to be fed, healed, or even made to run from storms, and if something's wrong with it, it affects your settlement's quality of life. Plus, there are expeditions to different biomes, deserts, mountains, jungles, where you gather loot and rescue survivors. And yeah, this is probably one of the few survival games without co-op. The game is designed strictly for solo play, which will be a big plus for some people. In my opinion, it's a pretty solid survival game with a unique concept, so if you missed it, I'd recommend fixing that. Night is Coming. This is an isometric survival game worth checking out. A survival game that throws you not just anywhere, but into a dark forest soaked in Slavic mythology, where instead of zombies, you're terrorized by forest spirits and ghouls. It's a mix of strategy, survival, and management, where you build a village and pray the evil spirits don't eat everyone by morning. The gameplay goes like this. You're the village head, the elder, and your job is to turn a couple huts into a fortress while darkness, the local apocalypse, doesn't cover everyone. The mechanics are survival with RTS elements. You gather resources, wood, food, herbs, build houses, forges, and walls, plus hire villagers, each with their own skills. Some chop wood, others brew potions, and someone's just a whiner who panics at the sight of a wolf. At night, creatures from Slavic legends come. Forest spirits, water spirits, bog witches, and that's when the hardcore begins. You set traps, light torches, and pray your barricades hold. Plus, the Slavic vibe is a real breath of fresh air. No zombies, just forest spirits and mermaids who want to finish you off. Downsides? Well, maybe just the small amount of content. You'll get hooked for about 10 to 15 hours, but I wouldn't call that critical. Cubic Odyssey, a game you could describe as a mix of No Man's Sky and surprise, Minecraft. And yeah, this is also a game that's not really on everyone's radar, which you could easily miss. Story-wise, you play as a space adventurer who crashes on a planet made entirely of cubes. Yeah, just like Minecraft. However, with one feature, the planet is infected with space plague, so obviously your task is to survive, build a base, and fight to save the world. By the way, there are a couple classes to choose from, like Miner or Warrior. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty simple. You chop trees, craft everything from houses to spaceships, and fight creatures of red darkness. Again, the modern foundation for all survival games is co-op, and yeah, it's here. So, if you want, you can play with a couple friends. There are also 3 modes: survival with objectives, creative for the lazy, and adventure for the bravest. Though, considering the game's early access, you understand there might be problems, usually with localization and bugs, so keep that in mind if you decide to check it out. This year also saw the release of Crashlands 2, a pretty solid sequel to the original, but with added co-op, even more humor, and tons of alien madness. Here you're Flux, a courier who's gotten into trouble on an alien planet again. The mechanics are 2D survival with action and RPG. You need to loot resources, craft gear, weapons, and even bases that can be turned into a real alien hub. There's also combat, which is pretty unique. You can go hand-to-hand or use psychedelic weapons that shoot, for example, exploding beetles. Unlike the first part, they added co-op for up to 4 people, which is pretty nice too. Obviously, there's a leveling system. You upgrade skills, collect gadgets, and even tame local creatures to fight for you. There aren't any optimization or bug problems, which survival games often have. And the game world is like a sci-fi carnival. Jungles with neon mushrooms, deserts with acid lakes, and tons of aliens from friendly ones to those who want to eat you. The visuals might put some people off with their cartoonish style, but personally I don't see anything critical about it. Lost Skies. Since I touched on survival games with cartoon graphics, let's continue with that theme. The concept might seem similar. There's co-op for up to 6 people where you explore floating islands, swing on grappling hooks, and try not to crash your ship. But as they say, not everything's smooth sailing in the skies, so let's figure it out. I'll start by saying the game puts you in the role of captain of your own flying bucket, which you build from scratch. Planks, sails, engines, everything's in your hands. The gameplay formula is simple, a mix of survival, crafting, and exploration. You gather resources on islands, craft gear, weapons, and ship upgrades, then take down robots or local creatures trying to shoot you down. But the main feature is physics. Your ship actually reacts to wind, weight, and damage, so don't be surprised if a poorly built contraption just crashes into the abyss. The game world consists of hundreds of floating islands, from jungles with ancient ruins to desert rocks with gravitational anomalies. The atmosphere is pure bliss, especially when playing with friends. Plus, ship customization is on point. Want to build a cozy house? Go ahead. Want a battle machine with cannons? The choice is yours. Lands Island, another survival game that reached its release this year. Here, like the games above, you also survive on an island, but not as a prisoner, more like a hero explorer who crashes on a mysterious island. The goal is pretty clear: explore new territory and try to survive. You can do this solo or with friends if you want. Along the way, obviously, you need to build a base, find food, and figure out why creatures like sharks and blind slugs are roaming around. So yeah, it's all pretty standard. You chop trees, plant potatoes, craft swords and bows, and later with friends you can go into dungeons and not only find trouble, but also interesting resources and stuff. Plus, you can hunt, fish, and even build your own farm if you want. Generally speaking, it's a pretty cozy survival game with equally cozy graphics and isometric view. Forever Sky, a survival game I remember talking about last year, and this year it reached full release, so let's keep it short and to the point. Forever Sky is somewhat like Subnautica, but in a world of sci-fi and post-apocalypse. Here you get a city covered in toxic fog, and your home is a flying airship. We play as a scientist who returned to Earth where everything was covered by an ecological disaster, and your task is to survive while exploring ruins floating in toxic smog. The main feature here is the airship itself, which you upgrade like a spaceship. Build compartments, install turbines, craft cannons and scanners to gather resources, and avoid getting caught in storms. You also need to monitor hunger, thirst, radiation, and ship condition, otherwise you're done for. Moreover, they recently added co-op to the game, so now you can play not alone like it was originally, but with a party of friends if you have them. The physics are realistic too, and every upgrade affects flight. And if you forget to repair the hull, yeah, logically, your ship will just fall apart. So if you want to cruise the skies in your flying bucket and save the Earth, you definitely shouldn't skip Forever Sky. And this is RuneScape Dragonwilds, a game that currently has pretty high player count on Steam. This is a survival game that took classic RuneScape and threw it into an open world with co-op and dragons, which surprisingly turned out to be a really good idea judging by Steam reviews, so let's keep it short and sweet. Here you play as an adventurer on a new continent where you need to survive, craft, and obviously kill dragons and other fantasy creatures. The mechanics are classic RuneScape, but in 3D. You chop trees, mine ore, catch fish, brew potions, and level skills just like the good old days. Except now it's all in an open world where you can build your dream base and fight bosses with up to 4 people. The world consists of several different biomes, forests, caves, and ancient ruins to explore. But the main thing is the leveling style, where every little thing you do levels a skill. Want to be a mage? Blast away with spells. Want to be a blacksmith? Forge swords. Plus, co-op really delivers. With friends, you can raid bosses or just chill building a castle. And bases can be customized down to the smallest detail, from wooden shacks to stone fortresses. And yeah, the game isn't compared to Valheim for nothing. They definitely have something in common. So if you haven't played yet, I highly recommend fixing that. The altars? At first glance, what's unique here? Another future? Heroes who crash on an unknown planet and need to survive? There are plenty of such survival games in general, and yeah, that's true. Except for one thing. Here, heroes learn to make their own clones. In the game, they're called altars. And the point is that each altar has a unique character which adds interest. So one might be a scientist, another into botany, a third a cook, another an engineer, and so on. Each has their role. The task is familiar for this genre: survive while managing your base. It's this huge wheel that moves from point A to point B while you customize and upgrade it, creating the necessary compartments to advance the story. So the gameplay is roughly this. You travel, gather resources, and try to please your team, because if they're unhappy, they might just start a whole rebellion. In general, if you're looking for something pretty unique, you definitely shouldn't pass this by. Ratopia. If my memory serves me right, I talked about this game a long time ago when it entered early access, and this year it finally reached full release. The game's concept is a bit unusual, like you need to build a dream city for fluffy rodents. Yeah, it's a mix of city building, survival, and economic strategy that'll make you forget about sleep until your rats live better than you do. And we play as the Rat Queen or King. Doesn't matter which, who rules an underground city. The task is to build, survive, and manage the economy while your rats don't start a rebellion. The mechanics are a mix of RimWorld, Oxygen Not Included, and Terraria. You gather resources, craft items, build houses, farms, and even factories so your rats live in luxury. The economy is a separate joy. You set taxes, regulate prices, and if you're too greedy, the rats start striking like a factory union. There are also battles with monsters crawling out of caves, so set traps and arm your rodents. There's no co-op, but honestly, the game can suck you in for a huge amount of time, despite its seemingly simple drawn visuals. The gameplay really delivers. If you love survival games focused on economy, this is one you definitely shouldn't skip. Into the Dead: Our Darkest Days. Probably one of the survival games I've been most excited about since last year, which I've told you about more than once. The game's concept and gameplay are very similar to the well-known This War of Mine, except if that game's theme was the horrors of war, this project focuses on zombie apocalypse. It's Texas in the 80s, and you play as the leader of your own group that needs to reach evacuation. How to achieve this and how many people actually make it depends entirely on you. Replayability here is just fantastic, and I'll say right away, the game has permadeath, meaning if someone from your group doesn't return from a mission and dies, yeah, they're gone forever. Moreover, this can affect your team's morale, which you'll also need to take care of. I'll also note that each person in your team is unique in their own way. There's a good shooter, a stealthy guy, and some whiner who'll just sit in the shelter consuming your food supplies. In the game, you'll need to balance between missions where you might run into a horde and fortifying your base because zombies don't sleep and they're breaking down doors. So yeah, the main feature is a mix of survival and management. Plus, the game has amazing visuals combined with equally great sound. I recommend playing with headphones or good speakers if possible. If you haven't tried it yet, I highly recommend fixing that. Aloft. As you could already tell from the video, survival games set not exactly on the ground, but rather on something floating in the air, aren't unique nowadays. The games mentioned above are proof of that, and early this year the game Aloft came out. In short, you're a survivor in a world where Earth is done for, and life thrives on floating islands. The main feature of the game, you take any island, slap sails and engines on it, and turn it into a flying ship. Here you fly around peacefully, explore other islands, gather resources, and build your dream base right in the clouds. The gameplay mechanics are familiar and standard for survival games. You chop trees, mine ore, cook food for buffs, but all with emphasis on relaxation and creativity. And yeah, co-op is here. I don't remember if it's 8 or 6 people, but you can definitely gather a bunch of friends. Oh, and I almost forgot, most islands in the game are infected with something, like some fungal plague, and basically you need to clean them so you can peacefully loot and craft stuff. And yeah, the game gives you complete creative freedom when building your floating islands. Want a palace with a farm? Easy. Want a battleship with cannons? That's possible too. It's like Raft where you built your own raft, except here it's your own island. Endzone 2. Let's finish with a survival game that's both similar to others and unique. The concept is basically the same as the first part. It's post-apocalypse, and you play as the leader of your own group of survivors who, after a global ecological disaster, are trying not to kick the bucket. Earth turned into hell, so here you get toxic rains and sandstorms where you get behind the wheel of your local shelter. As weird as that sounds. And just go looking for livable zones. In the game, you need to not only survive, but establish life, build a settlement, trade with others, and even fight off raiders trying to steal your last bag of potatoes. What's funny is that during the playthrough, you can either save humanity or become the king of the local wasteland. Gameplay-wise, it's simple. Something like a colony simulator. Here you manage a bus, choose locations for bases, build houses, farms, and workshops, then send expeditions to ruins for loot, but now with real-time character control instead of just clicks. And yeah, probably your main enemy in the game is the weather itself. Rain floods everything, or radiation just burns your crops, so you have to think about how not to kill your people.